right, you guys are good? Yes. All right, awesome. All right, so let's call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order, please. All right, first we're going to look, well, we've got a big agenda in front of us today, so got a lot to get through, but it's all great stuff. So let's start with our action items, please, and purchases. Mr. Oberst, you want to start walking us through those?
Yeah, there's a, good afternoon, Ms. Schatke and committee members. There is a pretty extensive purchasing agenda that includes, as an attachment, our list of blanket orders for the next year, for fiscal year 18-19. We generally have brought this in June. We're bringing it early this year because process-wise, we were ready to actually spend on July 1st, and by waiting until late June, it takes us time to set things up into July, so we thought we'd bring it to you this month. I will tell you that the blanket purchase listing there is no significant new vendors, if you will, that we're putting on a blanket purchase order. The purchasing agenda includes, as we get to the end of the year here, and as part of the Amendment 2 process, as we look at trying to amend that budget and as more information has come in, there's some adjustments to some of the current year blanket orders that were, as you know, estimated way back in June in some cases. Some bond purchase information and just some of the other normal stuff, some technology purchases of the bond also, and support materials, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm happy to take any questions. I've got purchasing director here also. Has any specific questions on this purchasing agenda?
Committee members, anything? Oh, yeah.
On the Straight School project,
yes.
Just like to note that that number does include an allowance for technology,
Okay.
which hasn't been bid yet. We'll go through the process,
Yep.
but there's an allowance in there for that.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, I might want to point out, and thank you, Ken, for noting that. There is that memo that is attached to the purchasing agenda. That Straight School is part of the site for the special ed center program. So, that's under discussion right now. So the future, so the plan right now is to make those upgrades with ISD special ed dollars, capital dollars, if you will, and then if things change in the future with that particular building, it's used as a center program site, we'll address it at that point in time. So it's essentially not our dollars, but it's our building.
And do those dollars alleviate all the concerns that were raised by members of the community?
We're in the second year of a 3-year plan, and this will address the restrooms, the lighting, the remainder of the flooring. The major one is the restrooms.
Okay.
And then the third year, or as soon as we can get to it, we have some roofing and mechanical issues to deal with.
Okay. Thank you.
Some of the issues that people brought up were also that the rooms, that there were dividers in the rooms, but so kind of like a space issue. Is that something that, that's a little bit of, that's a little bit of hearsay that I'm bringing up as well.
That's been a concern. We can't subdivide the rooms as they stand without major work.
Is that our third year?
It's more than just changing the lights and the heating distribution. It gets into exiting, the way the rooms are set up.
Right.
So we have provided some temporary dividers or partition dividers to separate the rooms. It will include new cabinetry in all the rooms that's set for the students that are there, including the wheelchair-bound students, with a space for the stove, a dishwasher, and a sink that they can access.
And so, I'm sorry, would some of those issues then be addressed in the third year of the plan?
Well, there's really not much we can do with dividing the rooms short of the partition-type dividers.
Okay. Okay, other questions on the purchasing agenda? It's a big one. Pause for a minute. All right. Okay, very good. All right, may I have a motion, please, to move this forward to the full board?
So move.
Support.
Excellent. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries.
Thank you. Next on the action on the agenda are the donations, and we have some very nice donations that we bring to the committee today. The first one is a grant from the Smart Zone Local Development Finance Authority for almost $385,000 approximately, to support the Innovation Central Advanced Technology Education Initiative, to add that over at the Central Innovation High. It'll provide funding for some renovation to the building as well as equipment for this initiative. Now, one of the issues is, as you know, Central is slated for $17 million of this bond, Ken. So it's an issue of timing what this grant, what needs to be done with the overall. Maybe, Ken, you could speak a little bit about that. We've met and talked about this, and
And I'm meeting with Principal Frost tomorrow to go over, because what we don't want to do is piecemeal and then tie our hands down the road. So we're trying to fit the two together based on the best information we have at the time, making sure that they can implement this grant in the building with the equipment that's coming and have it coincide with what we plan to do or what we think we plan to do long term.
Good. Okay, questions about that particular donation? All right, may I have a motion, please, to move forward this donation to the full board?
So moved. Support.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries.
the second contribution was from the community college. They gave us some of their used exercise equipment, which my understanding is it's been somewhat of a pattern of the last number of years, and the equipment is installed at both Ottawa Hills and Union High School to replace some outdated exercise equipment they have at those buildings. So no value attached to that. GRCC being a governmental organization, there's not a tax issue associated with that. But clearly, if there was a value, it's more than $2,500. So we bring it to this committee for acceptance of that equipment.
Wonderful. Questions about that donation? All right, seeing none, may I have a motion, please, to move forward this donation to the full board?
So move.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries.
And then the last donation there is a $703,500 contribution from the Weggy Foundation over a 3-year time frame to fund what's called Connecting Children to Nature. So it's a project, a couple of which will be done jointly with the city of Grand Rapids, including the first one, which is at Burton Middle, Plaster Creek, if you will. This is to build outside educational places, outside educational or outside green-related playgrounds too, Ken, right?
It'll have both educational aspects, and there could be outdoor classroom type construction, and primary piece is nature play, with pieces that are more representative of natural play areas. And I have Kristen Trevelyan is here, and she can speak a little more in detail than I can. But it's done jointly with the city, and it will cross property lines depending on the site.
Okay, all right.
I will mention that there will be approximately $200,000 to $300,000 of the park and rec millage from the city. It'll go into this also, so the total funding for this is over $1 million in the end.
Yeah, wonderful. Do you guys want any more details from Kristen about the space?
One quick question. Does this also cover the staff that will also be a part of the program? There's one staff person, correct? Or?
Yeah, there is $25,000 for a coordinator. I think there's another dollar amount, I don't have it with me. Yeah, there's a
But it's
couple
all
staff
included in
positions
this
that are,
piece.
yeah, part of that budget for the 703,000, yes, exactly.
Okay.
And the plan is, that we're moving quickly, is to get this first project done during the summer, the Burton Plaster Creek. So planning's well underway and forward.
All right. Any other questions, you guys? Good. Okay, hearing none. May I have a motion, please, to move this donation
moved.
forward?
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries.
Amendment 2. I've been mentioning the last couple of, maybe since Amendment 1 was done back in January, February. Generally, every year, near the end of the fiscal year, as we sit now, we look and bring in a second amendment to the board so that after the second amendment's done, our budget reflects where we think we're going to come out at year end. A lot of what, if you look at the general fund and the information's there, and many of the adjustments, the general fund, the general operations relate to firming up our ultimate estimate of foundation dollars. We did have finally got our fall count audited, so that those numbers are cast in stone now. So as you recall, our state aid's based on a 10% of the prior spring count and 90% of this current fall count. So we were waiting for the fall count to get the 90% piece. Now we know what our blended count is for the 17-18 year. We're adjusting our revenue targets as well as the enhancement millage dollars too. There was, within the general fund, the grant section, as you'll see at the detail, there was some significant increases in revenue as well as expenditures. It's been kind of a yo-yo with our Title I dollars this year from what they told us we were going to get early on and some adjustments that were made. And so the big adjustments in the grants column relate primarily to our title programs and the final, if you will, amounts that are coming our way. So more revenue recognized, at the same time more expense spent. As you call the grant section of our general operations, of our general budget, if you will, is a zero balance. It has no, whatever we get in is what we spend, has no impact on fund balance. And then a few other adjustments as we get down to the end of the year here in terms of firming up our final cost and revenue numbers. If you look, hopefully mine's numbered the same as yours is, but page 24 of your packet memo under my name has the impact on this that the Amendment 2 will have on the general fund balance. If you also look at what was at your spot when you walked in, a summary of fund balance. If you look at the orange column there, second from the right, that's what, and this is the fund balance computation under the early warning guidelines. The orange column will reflect Amendment 2. After Amendment 2, if it's approved, we would have a fund balance estimate of approximately 11.1 million, that top number there. Unrestricted general fund revenue of 145.5 million approximately. That gets us a fund balance percentage of 7.61. If you go back to actually to the first colored column, you'll see with the original budget, the fund balance was at 5.71%. Then after our 16-17 audit, we picked up some fund balance in that audit, so that raised the fund balance estimate for the current year to almost 8%. That's in the red column. And after Amendment 1, we gave back a little bit. That's the blue column, 7.35, and now we're at 7.61, and we'll talk about the green when we talk about the budget. So 426,000 pickup in fund balance on the general fund, which is, the percentage is still well within the range of 5% minimum. Special revenue, Amendment 2, similar type of information, firming things up in terms of revenue. The center program, again, special revenue, primarily the center programs and our food service. Center programs, as we can get done at the end of the year here, we have solid enrollment numbers, both from our districts and the districts of the center program serve. So we've adjusted the tuition dollars going out, tuition funds coming into us from those other districts to reflect actual enrollments and the actual cost of running the programs during the 17-18 year. And then the last budget we have to amend is a debt retirement or debt service budget. And big adjustment there was to reduce the property tax revenue by $1.2 million. That's related primarily to the DDA increment financing that they retain. At Amendment 1, we thought we were going to get some additional information on that. We found out that the information was from what they sent us like a year ago. That wasn't going to change, so we reflected that. Reduced revenue to us that's going to the DDA instead of us. That's a 1.260 reduction of property taxes. The only impact going forward, it'll increase our millage rate just slightly. You'll see that when we talk about the 18-19 budget. But that's the only major issue in the debt retirement fund. So that's, in a nutshell, what it looks like for Amendment 2. I'm certainly happy to address any questions you might have. Rhonda's here also, who is in much more the weeds than I get and can address any particular questions you might have that I can't answer. So,
Are our summer programs funded through this current budget, or are they funded for next year's budget? Do they begin July 1, or are they reflected
both,
in
right?
cost?
Both, yeah.
Both. Okay.
Yeah. Summer programs, a lot of title dollars, as you know. The accounting issue is that we have a July to June fiscal year. Mm-hmm. The federal and state fiscal year is October to September. So those title dollars are really spent October through September. So but even though we have to account for them on our fiscal year basis. So some of those title dollars are currently allocated to us, are spent this year or spent into our next fiscal year because they don't expire until September 30th of this year. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, and perhaps you might not have these numbers on the top of your head, but what does it cost us to fund our summer program for special ed students? That's been kind of a controversy.
The center programs?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have that at the top of my head, but
I'm wondering,
I'll find that out for you.
And has there been any consideration of perhaps increasing the level of programming there for students that there have been great concerns about those with autism and some of the more severe issues, so that we don't have further decline in learning during the summertime?
That's a question better given to certainly Ms. Lamore in terms of that, but we certainly get the finance and the numbers that are dollars that are spent on the summer programs. Okay. I don't have it on the top of my head. So. Okay.
And you're not aware of any initiative in that area?
The only initiative I'm aware of is the same any initiatives that the board is aware of. There are specific, my understanding, specific guidelines as to which special ed students would qualify for some of these summer extended programs. Right. Beyond that, I'm not aware of any.
And I understand that qualification for special programs, but that does not preclude us from targeting dollars and shifting budgets for local capital.
Other questions?
Yeah, other questions on Amendment 2? No? All right, it's nice to see some wiggle room in the fund balance, of course. That feels good, so thank you. All right, if I could have a motion, please, to move forward Amendment 2 to the full board.
So moved.
Support.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries.
All right, we'll just keep moving on here. We're into the reports, updates, discussion. The First, there is the April financial information. And
Excuse me, so you said first there. Where are we?
we're in reports, updates, discussion, item 1,
The financial statements, yeah.
April financial statements. To get back to my pardon me a minute. It's
I think you're
extensive.
bouncing around a bit. Is it 81?
Thank you.
I think. Looks like April 30 financial
Yes,
dashboard.
it is. Thank you. Yeah. So April 30th, 2000, the financial dashboard report there. Again, just to let you know, the 2018 annual budget column, the middle column, is prior to the Amendment 1. Presuming the board approves Amendment 1 at the board meeting on Monday, we'll change that. But through 10 months, we're tracking as expect to track. You can see we're in terms of the continued increase in our salaries based on the new agreements with the teachers last year. We expected that. Health and retirement continue to increase, and everything else is tracking pretty much according to plan, if you will. Down below, you can see the cash investment situation still is healthy. Bonded debt, that'll change. We had a payment in May, so next month you'll see that go down a bit. And then the capital expenditure information through April, we've actually, that middle number there, bonds-related capital expenditures grand total, that's $36 million that we've actually spent cash since the bonds were issued. As you know, there's a lot going on still, so that will continue to grow very rapidly as we ramp up the other parts of our building programs going forward here. So all in all, the year through 10 months is looking good, and all the detail behind the dashboard report is there for those that want to take a look at that detail. So, any questions on April financials? And Ken gave me an update on Warm, Safe, and Dry as it nears its end, and the bond also.
Warm, Safe, and Dry, there's really no update other than we're trying to close out all the projects and know exactly to the penny how much money we have left. We have in the neighborhood of $300,000. There's no time limit to spend it, but we want to make sure we spend it appropriately. Right now, it's in reserve for an emergency. Bond, the buildings under construction, the Museum High School and Buchanan are moving along nicely. Both have ribbon cutting set. I believe they're August 16 and August 17. GRPS University, the air conditioning and heat replacement, we're within a couple weeks of finishing that up. So we'll soon have that building available for professional development training. One thing we have done, the 6 elementaries for air conditioning, we brought bids for 2 of them last month. The other 4, our construction manager has recommended bidding in August, having a better chance to get bidders and quality bids. It will mean that there's more, we're going to lose some of the summer work, but the rest will go on second shift. But they've felt that it would be better in the long run for us to do it that way. So that's the schedule we're proceeding on, and that's noted in the sheet that you have. The other project that we wanted to put in the purchasing agenda this month and couldn't, we bid secure entries for 5 elementaries. We only got 1 bid. We have that now out for rebid, trying to get multiple bids, and we would request that we can take that to the June 18th board meeting on the purchase agenda, especially since there's no early July meeting. Yep. We want to get as much of that done this summer as possible. That was the first time we've really run up against the availability of contractors.
Very good. I would just say that if the AC, if prolonging the bids for AC is any different than has been communicated to parents or schools, we should be sure to communicate again. Can't over-communicate enough, especially when it's hot. Everybody's really thinking about AC.
Top of mind, yeah.
Yep, it's top of mind.
It won't change the completion date.
Perfect.
That will stay the same as
Great.
about next April, around spring break, it should be running.
Okay, glad to hear that. Thank you. Other questions about bond projects?
Mr. Clonpier, I was just trying to identify those 4 elementary schools.
The 4 that's
Oh, I see it here.
Brookside,
I found it.
East Leonard, North Park, and Shawmut.
And then the 2 that the bids were approved on were?
C.A. Frost Elementary and Campus Elementary.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
All righty. We are down to item 2 on the agenda, the policy. And under that heading is the proposed 2018-19 budget. Let me just refresh the memory here of the process. The Finance Committee gets the first look at the budget. That's why it's here as a policy review, if you will, as opposed to an action item. We had planned the process as we'd planned to bring it to the Finance Committee, get any comments that folks might have or any questions we can certainly answer. It'll go to the full board in the work session on June 11th. And so we'll have an ample opportunity to discuss with the full board at that point in time. And then following board meeting on the 18th, June 18th, will be a public hearing at 5:30. Then the regular board meeting at 6:30, and presumably have final approval of the budget at that June 18th board meeting. You do need approval by June 30th, as is always the case. So that's the process in terms of from here on out and getting the budget approved. Let me just, you also have in front of you a little PowerPoint presentation. Let's just look at that, and I'll give you a little bit of overview of the 2018-19 budget. I always like to show on the first slide there just a historical perspective on the foundation allowance. And the top line, and this goes back to 2004 as a base year. The top line of that foundation allowance slide is what the foundation allowance would have been if every year we had just gotten the rate of increase in the allowance equal to the inflation rate. And so if you look at, so in 2000, next year, the 2018-19, that foundation allowance, we just got the inflation rate since 2004 would be about almost $9,400. The budget has a foundation allowance of $7,871. So there's almost a $1,500 difference between our actual foundation allowance and what it would have been if we had just gotten the cost of living increase every year. We are using the $240 increase in the foundation allowance, which was recommended by both the governor and the House, and I'll talk a little more about that in just a minute. The next page is kind of a similar information. It holds that foundation allowance 2004 constant and adjusts the current allowance for the inflation, if you will. And this really represents, so the foundation allowance back in 2004 was almost $6,800. The purchasing power we have now is $5,700, so there's almost $1,100 loss in purchasing power since 2004, again reflecting the fact that the foundation allowance has not kept pace even with the rate of inflation. And as you're all aware, typically our health insurance costs, as well as frankly, for a while there, the retirement costs continue to go up more significantly than the rate of inflation. The next slide is just a historical perspective of our total revenue expense. The diamond line, if you will, is the revenue. The square lines are the expense. Obviously, you want the diamonds to be above the expense. You can see last year we almost broke even, and we're budgeting right now for a bit of a loss in 18-19. And then the last slide or last graph there is just the fund balance. This is percent of total revenue, not the early warning revenue percent, but it tells a similar story, if you will, where we had some high points in fund balance going back to 2011-12, and it has mostly, except for 1 year, dropped since that point in time. So as far as some of the assumptions in the 2018-19 budget, the first bullet point there, we are using a per pupil increase in the foundation allowance of $240. Back on May 16th was the revenue estimating conference, or May 15th. And at that point, the estimates were more positive than what had taken place when the estimates back in the January revenue estimating conference. So even though the budgets aren't final yet, they're in committee, based on the revenue numbers, we're pretty confident that the 240 per pupil increase will be what happens in 18-19. The Senate had 230, so only $10 less. We're believing that given the revenue increase at the state level, 240 makes sense. Based on our budgeted enrollment for the 18-19, that's about $3.8 million in new money, about a 3% increase over the prior year. It's the first time in a long time where we had the rate of increase in the foundation allowance exceed rate of inflation. Rate of inflation was about 2.1% this past year. So that's good news, obviously. Our major state restricted funds, 31A and readiness funding, are budgeted about $15.9 million. It's about $700,000 more than we estimate to receive in 2018. Second page there, revenue assumption, enhancement millage. The enrollment number, let me just take a step back. The enrollment number that's in the 18-19 budget is a total enrollment of 16,618. Okay, 16,618. Our final blended enrollment account for the current year, I mentioned we get that finalized, is 16,693. So we're using an enrollment about 75 students less than the current year blended rate. Try to be conservative. So that's what that's based on in terms of revenue numbers, and the expense numbers for that matter too. The enhancement millage, as you know, is funded with property taxes. There was a healthy increase in property values in Kent County. That enhancement millage is distributed proportionally based on enrollment. So while we expect to get an increase based on the increase in values, with some student losses, our portion of that may be down a little bit. So all in all, we're figuring about $205,000 more in enhancement funding in 18-19 over what we get in this current year. The Act 18, which is a county special education millage, budget to increase about $415,000 to $11.9 million. There is when you look at the budget, you'll see there's somewhat significant decrease in total revenue and as well as total expenses, and we'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But in the current year, you may recall I talked about this a year ago during the budget time, where there were some movement amongst the legislators in the House and Senate to rollback income tax in Michigan. So they had set aside up to $500 million. Well, that didn't happen. So, but of course they wanted to spend that $500 million someplace. Part of it went to the rainy day fund, and then there was a $200 million one-time buy-down of the unfunded liability in the retirement plan. And the way that was handled is we got an extra $2.5 million, and we turned around and sent it back to the state, $2.5 million. Well, that was a one-time event. It was not repeated. It was not in any of the budget proposals for 2018-19. So that's a revenue amount that goes away in the 18-19 budget, but the same amount goes away in the expense side, but it just looks a little odd. In terms of the expense assumptions, on the next page there are some employee cost increase, all in compensation increases, and we're in the process of, the teacher's contract was negotiated and settled on a year ago. We have a 3-year plan in terms of the new compensation model that's in place. The other 5 unions they all have reopeners for financial going on right now. So we're in the process of negotiating the financial side of those particular contracts right now. The parapros, we've settled on compensation. There is still to settle on the insurance issue, which will happen probably this week. And then the Grayson Group on, I guess, Thursday, we did settle with them going forward. So we have three more unions that we need to settle in terms of compensation. So we're making some estimates based on the compensation increase. We do know there's a hard cap increase that will take effect at this point for all groups on January 1st, as opposed to July 1st, and that cap increase on January 1st will essentially be, let's say, a 2-year increase. We've changed our health plan years. I think I talked about this last year. The MESA groups went to a calendar year end. The pool groups, which central office and parapros are in, are going to also go to a calendar year end. So we're delaying. So the MESA groups didn't get any premium increases. Will be effective for July 1st. Their premiums, which were set last July 1st, are good through the end of this calendar year. So we're trying to get everything on a January to December calendar year, including hard cap increases. So a new hard cap will come out in September of this year, and that's the hard cap that'll go in effect on January 1st for all employee groups. That's likely going to be a 6.5% increase of the current cap rates, because it's essentially a 2-year cap increase. So, and there's still a additional retirement cost. I think I talked about this when I went over the state budget proposals, that there's this 2-year adjustment to change the rate of return on the retirement from 8% to 7.5%. So that results in a increase in the normal cost. Plus, this is the first full year where for new employees, the new retirement plan went into effect, where the state automatically throws in 4%, and then the employee can put in another 3% or another 6% actually, and another 3% will be matched dollar for dollar by the district. So the normal cost of that is a little more expensive than it was before. So all those increases are estimated in the $2 million or so range. I will tell you there were no staff reductions other than the normal retirements and resignations, and as you talked about all along this year, some areas we've had a tough time filling vacancies. So all those combined allowed us not to have to make any reductions, if you will. In fact, right now, HR says all teacher placements for next year are complete. So we'll start the year out with that way, but of course, as you know, after the first few weeks of school, when things start sorting themselves out, we balance that amongst the buildings, if we will. So So no teacher reductions, actually no staff reductions at all, other than, as I said, other than resignations and retirements and unfilled positions. Where we could, made other expense reductions in non-salary areas, continued to look at our supplies and subcontracted services. We do know, as an example, that we've been on this 2-year process of upgrade our business software, which will turn on in July, and so that cost will be down significantly from what it has been the last couple of years. But there are other increases in the expense side. As you may recall, we just approved a new math curriculum. All in between that and the services, close to $2 million. So over a time frame, 4 or 5 year time frame, but will continue to increase the cost. And as we look at every year, try to replace curriculum. There are some technology upgrade costs that cannot be funded with bond dollars, maintenance, and add-ons, if you will, of some of our current, as we continue to get better with our Synergy software that was put in place a few years ago. We knew all along there'd be some things we turn on later, as we got to learn the technology, and there's some additional maintenance costs associated with that. Insurance costs for the district are predicted to increase also. Obviously, as you know, we're going to open a new museum high school in the fall. And so staffing that high school, even though some of those funds will come from the XQ grant, there's still Board of Ed general fund dollars for that new high school, and adding the 12th grade to Frost High School resulted in some additional staff for that particular high school. So, and then general inflationary costs we've talked before. So that's kind of a big picture view of the 18-19 budget, how we approached it. I'll stop there for a minute if anyone has any questions at this point. Dr. Flores, yeah.
Yes, I get a little confused because on page 81 on the enrollment, at the bottom of that page, it says enrollment for 2017 year to date is 15,373 total. And yet you said that we used the current blended rate of 16,693 for 2017, 2018. I heard you say earlier that, and I believe in reference to these numbers, that they were the state audited numbers. Or am I wrong?
The 16,693 number?
No, the 15.
No, those are just our internal records at the end of the month. That's a simple head count. What is not in on the dashboard report is not in there is shared time is not in there. They're not all special ed are in there also.
Okay, so last year then our blended rate, state audited, is 16,693?
Yes.
Correct.
And that's up from the previous year?
No, that's down from the previous year. I want to say 57, I think. And I will tell you, part of that decrease is related to we had some of the home services special ed students, which historically we've gotten a 0.2 FTE for those students. We're providing services. The state changed their interpretation of that and said it's either a full FTE or nothing. And they don't take, so I think there was a reduction of our FTE count of maybe 70 or 80 just related to that particular issue alone.
Okay.
We're still providing services. The reimbursement for those services is different. So we're still getting paid for the services. We're not getting the revenue on the
Okay, next question, if I could.
Yes.
Thank you. It has to deal with how you have allocated or designated categories. Total instruction, what is that made up of? On page 10 in the general budget.
That's that's essentially everything that goes into running a particular building. So staff costs,
So administration
curriculum costs.
and instruction, direct instruction.
administration, is administration in, no.
Well, it's following the state function code,
Yeah.
so like the school principal and school secretary would be down under support services. It would be the teachers, the parapros.
Okay, so direct instruction is teachers and staff, okay.
Classroom.
And so under support services is our administration cost,
The counselors
Overall in the district.
would be under the support too.
okay.
The facilities acquisition, building improvements, there's, again, you might ask, well, we've got bond dollars for that. Well, there are obviously some capital improvements we made that are not covered, one are not covered by bonds. As an example, you know, we have a fleet of vehicles, and we can never buy vehicles with bond dollars ever. So it's we could buy buses if we don't have buses, but security vehicles, delivery trucks, those kinds of things, we have to fund other general fund. And there's just always some minor purchases, you know, some furniture, things like equipment that we need to buy from time to time that are not budgeted with the bond dollars that have to come with the general fund. That's what that particular line is.
Now, not to belabor the point, but
No.
on because I like to look at the ratio of administrative costs versus direct instruction, and I know we do that in our dashboard. We do that in our monthly reporting. We have a line for administrative leadership. We have a line for instruction. We have a line for other administration, and all of the health benefit categories. What is our current ratio in administration to direct instruction? I mean, I'm looking at it without pulling out a calculator and saying close to 20%, but you know, those are very round figures.
You know, I off the top of my head, I don't know.
Okay, I'm just wondering whether we look at that in terms of.
Well, it's a matter of how you define, you know, how do you define administration too, so.
I don't know. How do you define it? You're the expert. You have to do that in light of our system, and then you know, certainly the categories that are required by state reporting, and then you know, for comparative purposes, you know, when questions are asked, you would need to have those. I think it's important in reporting to the public, certainly in reporting to our board. It's certainly a concern.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't have it in front of me, but I think I've talked before, and you certainly have seen some output from the IDIC software we have, and I look at, which has historical information too, and I look at, there's ways to slice and dice analysis. Administration is one of it. You can define it several different ways. I look at that, so, but again, I don't have it in front of me at the top of my head. But
I think it would be important, though, for edification purposes for our board as we build learning curve on expenditures in this district and prioritizing just what we spend our dollars on, providing you know the assistance that's needed to students so that they can meet the metrics that are required. And certainly we all want our children to be on grade level. We want them to be, you know, we want to be a highly performing district, and dollars that follow students for instruction, you know, that's generally how you produce, you know, the high academic metrics that are required. And so my questions relate to that. I mean, we do a good job in showing the subcategories in our dashboard. It seems to me that we could add that feature of a percentage. What percentage are we spending on administration? What percentage are we spending on direct instruction? And then that we look at that in a historical pattern, and a comparative pattern. You know, I mean, what does it take to educate a child these days to the highest level possible?
And I certainly can bring some information to the work session.
Okay.
This is the benefit of
I
talking
for one
here.
would appreciate it. I may be
No.
be alone, but
No,
you know.
It's interesting.
No, no. Again, it's-
But I think that, you know, in today's economy, I think taxpayers deserve to have the most bang for their buck, and we need to be, you know, performing at least state averages. And for our state, what is it, 49th? 41st.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's not good.
We're national news, and then for us to be even less than that, I hate to use the term unacceptable again, but it is unacceptable. And we're talking about human lives that either contribute to our society or are incapable of doing that because they've not been well prepared by our educational systems. And so, I don't know. I'm a proponent of raising the bar.
As we all are.
Yeah,
Good.
agreed. All right, Mr. Oberst, anything else?
Well, let me just,
that you wanna call our
let me
attention
go
to?
back, what I said I would earlier, back to the fund
Yeah.
balance spreadsheet, because the general fund budget, when it's all said and done, is budgeting to use another few $1 million of our fund balance. So the fund balance summary there, the long sheet, you can see the very last column, the green column there, you'll see based on the 2017-18 Amendment 2 and what this 18-19 budget is at this point, would get our fund balance down to just 5.86%, which again is above the 5% metric we need. But it does take more of our fund balance. I just want to make you aware of that. And just briefly, again, much like Amendment, or just like Amendment 2, there within your budget document, 1890 budget document, a couple other things I want to point out. There is a schedule of ad valorem tax rates. Look at that, find the page that you're on. Page 42 of your packet. And that summarizes all that since the 2016-17, all the taxes that are levied to support the schools. The 18 mil homestead operating tax, as you can see. Then we had a sinking fund back in 2016, at least part of the year 2016-17. That was let to expire. We let that expire on December 31st, 2016. In early March of 2016, we issued our first tranche of the bonds, $175 million bonds. So you can see at the end of the 16-17 year, our total taxes for a resident in Grand Rapids, 23.7449. And again, a homeowner would not pay the 18 mils, they just pay the sinking fund debt retirement. The 18-19 budget, as you can see, would propose only 22.3 mils. About a year ago, or in March of 2017, you may recall, we refinanced some I think 2012 bonds that saved taxpayers some money. So if you look from the 23.7449 rate in 2 years ago to 22.3, that difference of almost $1.5 million for a homeowner in Grand Rapids, average price of a house Grand Rapids now is about $110,000, $115,000. It'll save them about $80 a year now. So, in spite of all, doing all this construction, as you know, but we're still able to spend it responsibly, and did some things to ultimately reduce the millage rate from the last couple of years, where it was a couple of years ago. And then the budget also includes a special revenue budget. As I said earlier, primarily the center programs and the food service, which is 100% federal dollars. We're projecting some additional dollars into this special education fund, because of most of that funding comes from property taxes locally, at least. And then the debt service budget is pretty simple. It's the 4.3 mils that we are going to be levying in 2018-19. Our debt retirement schedule is set when bonds are issued, so we know what we're going to pay out every year. Really no mystery to those. So those are every year, the three budgets that we have to budget for by law, have to be reviewed and approved by the board ultimately. So that's all part of that whole budget packet. And then there's some other additional information we provide, some detail on the general fund budget, some historical information on millage rates and those kinds of things. So that's the first look at it. And, I certainly have a note to bring some additional supporting documentation on the 11th. If any of Finance Committee have any other questions before then or something else you want me to address at that work session, please email me. I'll be happy to prepare for that too. So the hope would be, or the objective would be to get the full board to agree on the budget on the 11th and take it for final approval on the 18th, as I mentioned earlier. So.
Okay, any other clarifying questions in preparation for the work session on the 11th? Good? Okay. And then Amendment 2, that will come on June 4, is that correct?
Yes.
The next board meeting? Okay, great. Thank you. All right, thanks as always for a lot of hard work on this. I can only imagine what goes into it.
One more
Yeah.
item there, the Green Revolving Fund update, which Kristen is here to.
Good afternoon. Per the directive of this committee, we have been looking at ways to implement a green revolving fund for our district. This is a fund that we would use to pay for projects that have measurable and verifiable energy savings to the district, and then we would measure that pre and post energy usage, capture that actual verified utility savings, and repay that expense into a revolving fund so that we can continually reinvest those dollars into more energy savings projects. We've identified a project at Mulick. That building still has T12 lights, which you may know are fairly inefficient lighting, or extremely inefficient lighting. And it's actually even hard to find replacement bulbs for T12 fixtures just because they've stopped making them. So we are proposing to do a T12 to LED conversion that will improve the light quality for the students, the coloring, and as well as save a lot of energy for the district. We are proposing that to be our first green revolving fund project. And we have proposed as a way to fund or seed that green revolving fund and pay for that first project, pursuing a loan through Michigan Saves, which is a state-sponsored, administered by a third-party nonprofit loan program for the commercial as well as institutional sectors. Consumers Energy has bought down the interest rate on that loan to 0%. So there's no cost of financing to the district, as well as they are agreeing to make the first year's payments up to $25,000. And so selecting Mulick as this lighting project, it has a verified measurable savings. We expect the project size to be around $75,000 so that we can maximize that consumer's energy incentive, and it will fit within the scope of the Michigan Saves program. I've outlined some of that in a memo for you all. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. But we are looking for your approval to move that forward to the full board for us to pursue that loan, subject to legal review and, of course, acceptable terms.
Yeah. Any questions?
I'd like to support that effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's really good.
Measure too.
I realized some savings just in out of the store.
Oh, great.
For the conversion. So I'm all for it. I do have a question though beyond that. Have we been looking at all on that whole issue of straws and plastics and doing anything about that? Meaning that there's a big movement in the country,
Right,
yeah.
in fact globally, to try to eliminate straws, the use of plastic straws or plastic bags, because we're contaminating the oceans, the natural habitat in our environment. And it seems to me like we use a lot of straws, I would think, with our food and nutrition programs, and they have now recyclable materials that they're using instead of the plastics.
Sure.
Less dependence on plastics would be an overall goal that I think would be admirable in our district.
Yes, absolutely. So beyond our composting efforts that we've been scaling across the district and adding at schools, we've also looked at where we have other wasteful practices. So one example is the prepackaged spork with the napkin wrapped in plastic. And so where possible, we've gone to just bulk forks or sporks available for students to take without having that unnecessary plastic wrap on top of them. And we have looked at moving to compostable products as well. We use compostable trays in many of our schools. We haven't implemented any cutlery that's compostable yet, or looked at straws yet. Well, we've looked at them, but we just haven't implemented it yet, just due to cost issues with that. But continually looking at the big picture of our lunchroom, our purchasing, and our waste to see where we can find savings to offset costs as we shift to more sustainable practices. So absolutely.
I just, as we talked this through internally with Kristen and superintendent, the questions that's always come to my mind, these kinds of projects, as Kristen described, is, can we really measure the savings? So maybe just talk a bit about this project, why it's easy, and how consumers is going to help us.
Sure, yeah. So we selected lighting. Lighting is one of the easiest projects in terms of measuring and verifying energy savings. It's not very complex, and time of use is fairly consistent. But we did have an extra layer of verification or assistance with that. Consumers Energy has given us 2 sub-meters that we've installed on representative classrooms at Mulek. So it will actually, they're installed right now. They're measuring the actual energy use of those classrooms and those areas, so we can extrapolate that data. We'll leave those installed after the retrofit that would happen this summer. And so we will know exactly pre-retrofit or pre-installation versus post-installation how that measures up to what our estimated savings were. So we have that added level of comfort and verification that the energy savings we expect to see are actually happening.
Wonderful. Sounds like we have a good partner in consumers. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, there's a lot of programs out there that will provide us free lights. They're performance contracting. They own the lights, and if anything happens, we have no lights. They can come take them. Kristen should be commended for finding a program that we own the lights. We have a way to start the revolving fund, get it seeded, get a portion of it paid for by Consumers Energy, and get it in. And so this has been the difficulty, to find the right way to make this start and take the first step. And the other thing that we should mention is we would also like to bring the Mulek light bid directly to the June 18th board meeting on the purchase agenda. Perfect. So we can get it done this summer.
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem with that.
Let me also mention that there is a companion policy that we developed that's actually going to the policy committee tomorrow, to their tomorrow's meeting, that lays out this program, the Green Revolving Fund, and how it'll be administered going forward. As you create a new pot of money in the district, but to make sure it gets spent the way it's supposed to be spent. So there'll be a policy that goes to that committee tomorrow and will ultimately come to the full board for approval. So, yeah, really what we need, since this does in fact require us to incur some debt, we do need board approval to do that. $100,000, I guess, ultimately. There on that, again, it's being bought down. If you look at the memo, we essentially get a $100,000 project that costs us $75,000 is all. So it's really good deal, and the savings will pay it back. So there's very little risk as a finance guy, there's very little risk to the district as far as I'm concerned. It's a great first start to this. It's an easy project, easy to measure, and it'll get us on our way. So, we need the approval from the board to move forward, and I would recommend we do that.
I do have one question. When do we think we will kind of recoup that money, or when will be the break-even point for us? How far into the program, or how many more things do we need to implement for it to kind of start repaying us?
Sure. So we would expect that to repay in about 2 years.
That's quick.
So everything after that's just
Yep. Money in the bank. Great. More projects. Okay. So you need a motion to move it forward? All right, great. May I have a motion, please, to move forward?
So moved.
Support.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, I believe that's everything. So just a recognition of all the work that went into preparing for this meeting for the purchasing agenda for Amendment 2 and for our budget. So thank you to all of you that played a role in that. We really appreciate you. And then just to recap, Dr. Flores, what I heard from you is you're looking for cost for ESY, correct? Extended school year in the summer, and then ratio of instruction to administration and how we compare. Okay, very good.
And I would hope that we'd be able to facilitate that additional funds like we do, like we've done this project.
Sure.
It is possible within our general resources or our general fund to sometimes craft out without
Very good.
breaking the bank.
Heard. Very good. All right, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.